On today's show, with the Capitals' great play as of late, there's a lot of questions. The trade deadline is on March 7th, so should the Capitals make big trades or should they keep the team as is? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about Ilia Protas, the younger brother of Aliaksei Protas. And you take a look at what Aliaksei Protas has accomplished this year, has grown by leaps and bounds, double digits in goal. What do the Capitals have in his younger brother, Ilya Protas? I'll talk about that a bit later. I'll talk about Alex Ovechkin on the verge of history. And I think that sometimes that doesn't get too noticed, or we don't take it for what it is, that we are on the cusp of greatness, that Alex Ovechkin chasing down Wayne Gretzky will most likely happen in early April, according to recent projections. I'll talk about that. But just to get it going here, the questions that surround the Capitals as they are riding high off a successful weekend, sitting in first place in the NHL, that sometimes you take a look at the team and it feels a bit bulletproof, like this team can do no wrong. You take a look at the success that they had between the Pittsburgh and the Edmonton games, putting up 15 goals. Crazy what this Capitals team is doing, but there's a lot of questions out there about, is it sustainable, and is this team battle tested and ready for a playoff push? That's where we're going to start today, is the state of the Capitals. And you take a look at it, and I have differing opinions on it. I know what I know about this team and how they're playing right now, that if you take a look at just the numbers alone, it's quite stunning. The first place, the most points in all of the National Hockey League, there is a lot to love. But today, I was listening to Frank Saravalli's podcast, one of the premier insiders in the NHL, and he was talking about that is there some recency bias as far as the Capitals are concerned, that they're playing well as of late. But how are they going to play in the bigger picture, as we have seen ebbs and flows? And oftentimes it's easy to ride the highs and sometimes forget about the lows. And he even made a comment that it would be a coin flip if the Capitals played Carolina, if they played the Panthers or the Maple Leafs, that on paper it seems like the Capitals should just run away with it. But he said for him, it would be a coin flip, because this team, you take a look at what they accomplished last season, that they got fanned out in the playoffs in short order. The season before that, they didn't make it to the playoffs, period. That there are a lot of great pieces on this team, but many of the players that are on this team have not been tested in the playoffs, or at least this group. That it's an interesting take. And ultimately, how would this team weather the storm in the playoffs? We take a look at Ethan Frank, for example, has played really well since his call-up, but he has no experience in the NHL postseason. You take a look at Lars Eller, where if you listen to any NHL podcast, they talk about the most glaring weakness on the Capitals. It's the third line, and more specifically, the third line center. How would that fare? And then you take a look at the depth on the team. So say some of the players falter and they fail. Well, they have Sonny Milano at some point. They got Jakob Vrana at some point. You take a look at the blue line. It's Alexeyev and McElrath. Those aren't necessarily the names that are like, okay, this player's out or they're not performing where they need to. But we got Sonny Milano or we got Jakob Vrana. Those aren't the players that are making me feel over enthusiastic. So kind of the flip side of it is that the Capitals are playing so well right now that you say there is recency bias, that this team is not battle tested. So what players are you going to pull out of the lineup to give this team more credibility or more of an experienced lineup? I guess if you were going to do it, it would be the third line. I mean, if you take a look at the first line, the second line, and the fourth line, there's no player that like, I want to yank that guy out of the lineup. So it's an interesting take. And despite what Frank Saravalli thinks, and I value his opinion, it is an interesting take that this team isn't battle tested. Some players are. We know that Ovechkin and Carlson and Wilson, these kind of guys have been through the rigors, but also take a look at what this team has done as of late in the playoffs. And I understand it's not an apples for apples comparison, as this lineup is quite a bit different. So let's take a look at both sides of the coin as far as the Capitals are concerned. We're going to talk about the latest buzz around this team, as there is a lot of buzz surrounding this team. Hearing crazy comments from everyone. People that don't normally talk about the Capitals are talking about the Capitals, that there is definitely a target of sorts on the Capitals and some people, and I think a lot of them are the NHL insiders that don't want to let go of the fact that they were wrong. So, and no one likes to be wrong. I don't like to be wrong. But with their impressive lead, it's clear the Capitals are in a great position as contenders. But as we know, that sometimes means looking to strengthen the lineup to gear up for a potentially deep playoff run. Again, I hear that. And, you take a look at it. I know that the players that I listed, the healthy scratches, I'm talking Jacob Vrana and I'm talking Sonny Milano, who is still injured, that if they did go out and address a player, would they be any better than either two of those players or the options that we have down in Hershey? If they're going to get a third or fourth line player as a depth player, is that going to be any better than an Ivan Miroshnichenko or an Ethan Frank? Those are the kind of questions that you have to ask yourself. That, it's an easy thing to say that the Capitals need to stockpile and get a lot of assets, but chemistry is something that is not easily quantifiable. I think it will be at some point that AI is going to come up with some sort of formula where this team has a positive chemistry ratio. But it's interesting, even on the national broadcast, they talk about the chemistry. They talk about Spencer Carbery is the ringleader, the guy that is that enthusiastic voice. He is the guy that's heaping out the praise and also the guy that's giving out tough love when needed. So it is a tightrope for Chris Patrick, Brian McClellan, and the Capitals organization to walk on how to address these weaknesses. Several players are making waves this season, and that's one of the things that was spoke of, as well as a lot of players on the Capitals are having career years. Strome, Protas, Chychrun, all contributing to the Capitals' success. Connor McMichael, that sometimes those numbers skew how things go. But it's about coaching success under the guidance of head coach Spencer Carbery, who's earned respect across the league in just a season and a half. The team has really gelled together with effective strategies. And what is it about? What is working this season that didn't work last season? Well, it's different players for one, but it's also fully buying into Spencer Carbery systems. I think he knew it all along. And the frustration that we saw last season when they weren't playing the way that he had hoped, that was evident that they're fully buying into his system. In a lot of ways, it's like, see, guys, it's working. And when you see it working and you see that translating to wins, I think it's easier to buy into those systems. But strategy consideration, however, we have to ask, should they stick to this winning formula, or is there room for some strategic tweaks? Again, the trade deadline is right around the corner. And the tough part for me, what I've said is this lineup is stacked. And I listened to Saravalli's thoughts saying it's not battle tested, is how do they proceed? They don't have a lot of time to think about it. And, I hear that they need to replace Eller. But, who is that player that they're going to replace him with? And I'll talk about that a little bit later in this segment is, are they going to have to mortgage the farm? And is that the right time right now? I kind of think it is in a lot of ways, as we don't know what this Capitals team will do next year. Now, injuries and changes are a reality for any playoff-bound team. You take a look at McAvoy from the Bruins. You take a look at Tkachuk, these players that were involved and are now injured, right? So injuries sometimes can derail your team in a hurry. Think of Tom Wilson a few years ago when the Capitals were playing the Panthers, and he got injured, didn't come back. It can be an absolute game changer. Now, even though the Caps have been performing strongly this season, it's important to consider how well equipped they are for the challenges ahead. So it's stockpiling players. I guess you could have Lars Eller, as we think is going to be gone this summer anyway, and have him as a depth piece, as I don't know. Or maybe they could try to trade him as well. And it's defensive consistency. Looking at the roster, the defensive side is notably consistent, very rock solid. It's not, when we hear weakness, you hear the third line. Rarely do you hear anyone criticize the Capitals' blue line. It is rock solid with 6 defensemen each playing 45 games or more. Again, but what would happen if the Capitals were minus Sandin or Carlson? So I do think they need to make some moves. I think that McElrath is a viable option, as we saw him last year. Alexeyev, that's a big old question mark for me. That I think that they at least need one forward and one defender that is going to be able to fill in as needed, because AHL talent is good, and I sing the praises all the time, but we need a player, to Frank's point, that is battle tested. And let's not forget about goalies. Rock solid. LT, Charlie Lindgren. Can Logan Thompson continue to sustain? And if not, can Charlie Lindgren pick up the reins, and vice versa? I guess the luxury that the Capitals have in that position is what they have in Hershey, right? They have Hunter Shepard, they have Clay Stevenson. Can those two guys stay healthy as well? That the Capitals are in a good position. So my big takeaway on this is I do think that they need a depth forward, and I think they need a depth defenseman. And if that means moving on from an Eller or an Alexeyev or something of that nature, or they may need to get bundled, then so be it. So now turning to potential upgrades, particularly at the center position. We remember Lars Eller was acquired from the Penguins. At the time was a good move, but there are whispers about adding more depth, more competent third line center options. And one name that is getting floated out there a lot is Scott Laughton, the 30-year-old center from Oakville, Ontario. I think would be that guy. You take a look at it, there are these marquee names out there. I don't think that's what the Capitals want to do. They need a guy like Scott Laughton that is going to be that third line center. He's had limited playoff experience in his 12-year career with just 24 games under his belt. So it kind of fits with the Capitals in general. And, to what Frank said, not battle tested. You got to get experience sometime, right? So there is no magic bullet, or there is no secret answer to this team. I just think that they need to go for it. And this is the year that I feel that the Capitals have the best chance of doing great things. Ovechkin here next year, out into the sunset. Let's make hay while the sun shines. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Alex Ovechkin as he edges closer to history. I'll break it all down straight ahead. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy, just use Indeed instead. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored job sites post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidate faster. So listen, if you are involved in the hiring and firing, it can be frustrating. Take all the frustration out of it with Indeed. Now you can speed up the hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Capitals podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this next segment here, we're talking about Ovechkin as he edges closer to Gretzky. 12 to catch, 13 to pass. There is a lot of excitement. He did say that he wants to view it as a game-by-game situation, which I think is the right thing to do. And you take a look at the Capitals, I think they are doing whatever it takes to help get him across the finish line. If it is extended time on the power play, if it is having him out there when the opposing team decides to pull their goalie, they are full in on Alex Ovechkin catching and passing Wayne Gretzky this year. I think it's kind of a foregone conclusion that it is going to happen this year. And now it does appear that it is going to be in early April. Now, I really hate to talk about specific games as it has changed quite a bit, which kind of loses all the credibility in the whole thing in the first place. And an interesting, slightly hyperbolic question that Elliotte Friedman had is, would the Capitals entertain the possibility of benching Alex Ovechkin when he gets really close when they're playing on the road so he can cross the finish line at home? I think it's a crazy idea, and they thought it was crazy as well, but an interesting thought. I think it would be an ideal situation that Alex Ovechkin did that. He caught and passed Gretzky at home. If that is a possibility, I don't know. I think to the end of the day, Alex Ovechkin just wants to get it done, and I don't think he would hear anything for being benched until he's playing at home, because then could you imagine something crazy happen and the team wasn't playing well and he wasn't able to get it done this year? But a funny take, and I do appreciate those kind of in the weeds thoughts that a guy like Elliotte Friedman has. But we're talking about that 13 goals away from shattering the NHL all-time goals record. Can you taste it? There is a rumbling in the air. Kind of, can you feel it? Not just about Alex Ovechkin, but this team in general, that it is truly poised for great things. And, I hate to pour water all over Frank Seravalli's point that this team's not battle-tested. I do think that it's not going to be an easy thing. And I think if the Capitals make it to the playoffs, it won't be easy. But with Ovechkin playing, with all the players that are having career years, it's quite something. And now he has the most hat tricks by any player over 30 in NHL history. He recently notched the 32nd career hat trick against the Oilers, positioning himself to reach an impressive career goal, a total of 882. So he is right there. He is on the cusp of greatness, and he's feeling it. Despite the fact that he's kind of deflects it from time to time, he's swearing under his breath. His wife is swearing under her breath that they're all in. Plus, he tied a significant record for a game-winning goal that he's expected to claim outright by the end of the season. Now, key moments here. It was against the Oilers, that historic hat trick, that memorable hat trick, that it's starting to feel real for Ovechkin right now. Ovechkin's second goal was a crucial power play goal. The final moments of the second period helping the Capitals establish a 4-1 lead. That goal in particular not only contributed to a 7-3 victory, but also marked the 135th game-winning goal by Ovi, tying him with Jaromir Jagr for the most all time. It is in the air tonight, getting real soon, and it's excitement. The excitement is palpable the more games that are played and the more goals that the great eight is scoring. Now, Ovechkin's 881st career goal came against Pickard. Again, I talked about that yesterday. Another notch on his belt, making him the 181st goaltender he scored against through his career. Quite a career that he's had, and all the milestones that he's knocking down. Now, looking at the current league landscape, the closest active player to Ovi's game-winning goals record is Sidney Crosby with 95. Now, Ovechkin has averaged 6.8 game-winning goals per season, and he had a career high of 11 game winners in 3 different seasons, 07-08, 10-11, and 14-15. This season, he's already racked up 6 game-winning goals, the highest he's recorded since the 2020-21 season, at 39 years old, aging like a fine wine. Father Time is undefeated and all that. You can go shut up and sit in the corner. That is not true. Not always. It's sometimes easy to paint these cliches and things with a broad brush. Not the case in Ovechkin's case. Now, as of now, only 7 players in the NHL have more game-winning goals than Ovechkin this season, including Mark Scheifele, Matt Boldy, and Leon Draisaitl. So he is in elite company, and it is fun to watch all of this unfold. Again, he's chasing down Gretzky, but it's everything else between here and there that he's doing, that when he's done, when he rides on that camel, that's what it's going to be, out into the sunset, he is going to have one impressive mantle or trophy case. And he's in it, big time. He is a guy that loves all the trophies and the mantles and, the ribbons and all those kind of things, that I think that it's not even that. It's just the mental victory, as well as knowing I did it. I put the work in. I did an unthinkable thing. I got this team that had never won a Stanley Cup to win a Stanley Cup. I caught and passed the greatest goal scorer of all time. That has to be a sweet moment for Alex Ovechkin when it arrives, and really a sweet moment for us Capitals fans as well. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the latest with Ilia Protas. Ilia Protas? Did you mean Aliaksei Protas? No, Ilia Protas. Aliaksei Protas' young brother is kind of taking a page from Aliaksei and lighting it up for Windsor. I'll give you all the latest straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. All right, in this next segment here, we're talking Protas, Ilia Protas, that is, as he is going to be a big piece of the Capitals' future. That much I know for sure. And if he can be just a glimpse of what Protas is, then I think that we will be in a good position. You take a look at what Aliaksei has put up, to start his career. They were kind of lackluster numbers, but as of late, a lot like other Capitals players, they have really found their way this year. Can Ilya, Alexei's brother, can he follow in those footsteps? That's what we're going to dive into in this segment, lighting it up for the Windsor Spitfires. This young winger is truly making waves. Just Sunday night, Protas recorded a remarkable 5-point game in Windsor's 7-3 victory over the Saginaw Spirit. And if you can get a chance to watch these games online, they're quite something. That's right, he scored 2 goals and added 3 assists, bringing his total to 40 goals for the season. Quite an accomplishment for the young Protas. With that milestone, Protas has officially become the highest scoring import player in Windsor Spitfires history. That's quite an accomplishment for his young brother there. And I think that at some point, he's probably a couple years out as well, he is going to be ready to take the Capitals to the next level. Again, Capitals good right now. Leonard joining the team here in the spring. Crystal, I expect to be on the roster next season. It is going to be quite something. But highlight real goals. That is what young Ilya does. Protas' first goal came during a power play early in the first period when he slipped past the Spirit's penalty kill and scored in a one-on-one situation against their netminder. What did he do? What have you done for me lately? He followed that up with another goal later in the first, showcasing his playmaking instincts after winning an offensive zone faceoff and firing a perfect pass glove side. So this guy has the offensive firepower, and I heard that Aliaksei and Ilya, they were working on shooting in the off season. It has paid off for both players, as both players are at elite levels in the respective category there. In the point streak for Ilya continues. Protas also assisted on 3 of Windsor's final goals, extending the point streak to an impressive 8 games. In just the last games, he racked up an astounding 12 points, 4 goals, and 8 assists. That is some fire from Ilia Protas. In terms of statistics, Ilia Protas now has a total of 98 points through 52 games this season with 41 goals and 57 assists. That puts him in 4th in the OHL scoring race, right ahead of his fellow Capitals prospects, Patrick Thomas, who has 92 points for the Brantford Bulldogs. But a rising star within the ranks of the Capitals, Protas is already surpassing the impressive junior season of his brother Aliaksei. Aliaksei is having a solid season as well, of course, in the NHL. So a lot of excitement around the Protas house, I do imagine, as they continue to keep knocking it out of the park, and just keep working on his game. You take a look at it. Ilya is still a young man, but if he continues on this clip with this trajectory, he is going to be Capitals ready sooner than later. And you got to look at it. So these players are going to be aging out, right? These guys that were young time at one time. You look at Wilson. I remember when his first game in the league. Now he's already one of the elders of the team, and John Carlson and Ovechkin and all these guys, that we need this next wave on preheat. So when those guys ride out into the sunset, we can hit it to bake, and the Capitals will get ready to bake. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered on all the news surrounding the NHL 5 days a week on YouTube or on your podcatcher of choice. Make sure you make that your next listen. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.